Human design is a part science, part spiritual system that tells you who you came here to be. You have your own blueprint, your own way of becoming successful, your own way your dreams are going to come true, the way you'll experience the most joy and fulfillment. The instruction manual for how to move through the world is custom to you. When you act according to that manual, when you act as the real you, everything in life comes to you with more ease and less resistance. We all know we're different, yet we're still acting like there's one way to do life. Let's talk about it. To find out your design and the designs of the people in your life, you can visit myhumandesign.com or download the My Human Design app in the App Store and on Google Play. A friend of ours recently asked us if there's such a thing as bad timing, and I thought it was such a layered, juicy question that we should make a podcast about it. So there's two angles that you can look at bad timing through. The first one is this idea that if you do something wrong, then you will get the wrong outcome. And I think a lot of us are trying to, overthink things so that we just don't get it wrong in life. And I think especially women. So what I wanted to say to her was, it depends what you define as bad timing. If you think that bad timing was because you met someone that you fell deeply in love with and you felt like part of you was like, maybe they're the one and maybe they weren't, and you're wondering if it was only because of bad timing, that's only you calling it bad timing because the outcome wasn't the quote unquote what your mind thought was the best outcome. So from that perspective, why are we calling it good timing or bad timing is because what our limited brains look at the effects of that cause and judge that effect as being bad, right? But for example, is it bad timing that you applied for that job when you applied and then you didn't get it? Maybe you're saved from doing something better, right? So what we think is bad timing in a short, zoomed in version of our lives, maybe there's a chance that actually it's good timing. It's all good timing when you zoom out and see the wider context. So I think that concept is really interesting, is like, why do we call it bad timing? Is because we think that the effects of it are bad, and it's our minds and our conditioning judging it as bad. So if you're in a place where you've ever wondered, like, was it right person, wrong time? Was it right place, wrong time? That's really an exercise where you can say, it's not for me to be the exactor of my life. It's for me to be the exactor of my consciousness, but the universe is the exactor of my life, right? And actually, the more I try to stay true to myself in every moment, that's actually how I can align with the best timing. So maybe there isn't such a thing as bad timing, but what we can do is align ourselves with the best timing, meaning we can get in the way when we are acting out of fear or control by delaying things because we are trying to go in opposite directions, and then the universe needs extra time to kind of get us back on track. Or, for example, if you are doing something that is the complete waste of your time, that's just time spent away from doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. So there's no such thing as getting it wrong. There's just such a thing as kind of going off piste. And actually, life is designed so that we can go off piste because that's how we learn as human beings. Like if we were always on piste, there'd be no learning, there'd be no growth, there'd be no challenges. So the actual going off track, therefore causing quote unquote delays, is an inherent part of the necessary growth triggering process for all of us. The other thing about bad timing is that from a human design perspective, and this is going to get a little woo-woo, but from a human design perspective, we live in a space-time continuum where space and time play off of each other. According to human design, space is actually the much more important weighted factor than time is. So consider this. And I'll tell you the exact way that Ra Uru Hu puts it, because I think it's absolutely brilliant. He says that everything in your life is mapped out based on your location. So how was I going to find you, Taylor, if I needed to find you? I would say it was Taylor that was born in this place, or Taylor that is currently geolocated to here. Like, how else would I find a human being? And this is one of the secrets of the G center in human design. The G center is that little diamond, if you're looking at your chart, in the middle of your chart. And the G center is a very nebulous center because it concerns itself not with such physical, tangible things like, how your sacral is all about the gut and the emotions and the solar plexus. That's like a very human thing. The G center is this thing that we can't quite understand because it concerns our relationship to love and it concerns our relationship to direction. So the G center is a center that literally pins us onto our life path in this world. So imagine in this interplay between free will and destiny, Taylor, your life is literally mapped out on the most rudimentary way from, okay, she's born here and then she goes to the coffee shop and then she goes home and then she goes to the Pilates studio and then she comes home and then she travels to LA and then she goes to Ibiza. So all of that, if nothing else, how do we measure our life and where it pans out is the location of our life. And what he says that I think is so beautiful is it's not when you're going to die. It's almost when you reach the end of that thread that you're here to weave in terms of your geophysical location on this planet. So even if you've gone around that block 40 times, if your 41st turn around that block is the time when your thread is up, that's when your life is complete. So when we talk about timing, I think we put so much emphasis on timing rather than we do on physical matter. And one of the reasons why I think we do that is because we would rather put it down to timing than we would about physical actions and our own responsibility over where we move, how we move, listening to our strategy and authority, and where we physically go in this world. And if we are using our authority correctly, that will tell us whether you're splenic and it says, go early to the parking lot, or whether you're gut sacral authority and it says, say this to this person, and that embroils you in another direction. So it's much more about love and direction, and we move from love of life, right? We move of love of self, we move of love of listening to people and being with people and creativity. It's not so much our interpersonal relationships. The G center's love is much more those kind of big conceptual spiritual concepts of love, right? So when we're moved by those things and we're allowing us, our literal little ant, to be moved around this world more presently and properly, then we negate the possibility of, I'm not going to say bad timing because there's no such thing as bad timing, but delayed timing and veering off the thread that is literally laid out for you in this world. So I think a lot of it as well is spiritual ego, because if you're a person whose ego is not the one who thinks they're amazing, but the one that tends to try to put themselves down or self-flagellate, then that thought of getting it wrong is really destructive, is only going to serve to actually throw you more off course. And it actually stops you from taking the responsibility from the part that is yours, which is like, oh, if I listen to myself in every moment, then I don't have to worry about the outcome at every point because it's just going to be the outcome that's meant for me. So that's really important. I also want to read you a Chinese parable that my dad sent me a long time ago, but it sticks with me so much that really pertains to this. All right. There's a Chinese story of a farmer who used an old horse to till his fields. One day, the horse escaped into the hills, and when the farmer's neighbors sympathized with the old man over his bad luck, the farmer replied, "Bad luck? Good luck? Who knows?" A week later, the horse returned with a herd of horses from the hills, and this time the neighbors congratulated the farmer on his good luck. His reply was, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" Then, when the farmer's son was attempting to tame one of the wild horses, he fell off its back and broke his leg. Everyone thought this was very bad luck. Not the farmer, whose only reaction was, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" Some weeks later, the army marched into the village and conscripted every able-bodied youth they found there. When they saw the farmer's son with his broken back, they let him off. Now, was that good luck or bad luck? Who knows? Everything that seems on the surface to be an evil may be a good in disguise, and everything that seems good on the surface may really be an evil. So we are wise when we leave it to God to decide what is good fortune and what misfortune, and thank Him that all things turn out for good with those who love Him. So I just want you to know that if you are a person who is listening to this, it means that most likely you are moving through the world with the intention of doing your best and of being your best and becoming someone that you're proud to be. And so therefore, what I would encourage is to stop trying to play referee because that is a place that actually we think makes us better people, but actually is just going to take us away from the real work, which is listening to your strategy and authority in the present moment. That is the quickest way to align. And I can guarantee you, especially now in this new paradigm, we talk a lot about this in the app, about how space and time are shortening. And therefore, every action you make can take you so much further, both for the positive and the negative, that right now, even just one moment of listening to your strategy or your authority can completely turn your life around. So even if you're someone who feels like a lot of us are feeling right now, this in-between space, that you're kind of in a limbo, waiting for something to start, but something else is ending, and you're kind of going through that cocoon before you become the butterfly. Or if you feel like you just can't catch a break right now and things are just tough after tough after tough, just know that one good moment of actually practicing your real operating system, being who you really are, right? And that's what your human design gives you the instruction manual for, is so much more impactful than it probably ever has been. And that, again, where we're probably delaying the timing is in ruminating in our heads of, is this bad? Is this good? Is it good timing? Is it bad timing? All of that stuff that we really only do to make ourselves feel safe and in control. And we have to give grace for that, because that's a beautiful thing to want. It's just now we're using it for the wrong reasons.
I like that you bring up how we met as a good example for this, because that was one of the threads that led to us meeting, was me listening to my authority. And that whole experience could have really been in my head, oh, this was bad timing. So in 2018, my spleen said move to LA. And at that time, I was living with my now husband. We had been together for 4 years. That made no sense to me. Leave. My husband could not leave. I worked remotely, but my spleen was very insistent about it. So I moved to LA, and the plan was to move there for a year. And I connected with Krista, who you all probably know from the Almost 30 podcast. I helped Krista and Lindsay with some events because I just, I wanted something to do. And there was a moment when I had taken some video for them and the video wasn't uploading properly on my computer. So I went to Lindsay's apartment because I was like, oh, I'll just load it from my camera directly onto your computer. As I'm arriving at Lindsay's apartment, Jenna is leaving Lindsay's apartment. And I said, hi, oh my gosh, I love human design. I had found out about it like 4 years before that on a podcast that you were on. So I knew who you were and I was obsessed with it. And I was like, oh my God, I moved here because my spleen told me to move here. So I had a 1-year lease. And then a couple months later, it was about 6 months into me living there. And my spleen was like, you're done. I had nothing to show for it except for I had met a couple people. It made no sense to me why I moved there for 6 months. I could have easily been like, it had been a dream for me as a kid to live there and work in the film industry. I could have easily gone home and been like, oh, it was bad timing. I should have done it when I was a kid. Like, it was just too late for me. It just wasn't for me, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, a year and a half later, when you saw a TikTok I made, there was a thread there where you knew who I was, and that led to this. So if I hadn't made that decision with my spleen, this wouldn't have happened. But also bringing in the illustration you just said of the thread, like us only having a certain amount of thread, I followed the thread there, and then I brought the thread back when it was done. Mm-hmm. I didn't spin out staying in LA trying to make something of that I wanted to make of that. I just listened.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important to remind ourselves, because when we say, oh, it wouldn't have happened without it, obviously we could have met in 100 different ways, but that was one of the openings that you, because you listened to your strategy and authority, opened up, right? So the universe says, okay, if I'm supposed to do this certain thing, there's 100 different gates that you can open to get there, because guaranteed we're probably going to miss a few anyway, right? So it gives us, there's loads of ways that things can happen, but all that matters is that one happened, right? So we can't even say we never would have met if you hadn't gone. But also, I know from speaking to you that there's many other positive ramifications that came from you being there that don't concern your work life. So that turned out to be the one that sorts everything out, as most things do, right? So it's really interesting, because I think we try to focus on like the best thing, but there's literally so many avenues that can pop us from A to B that the universe will use because it's so infinitely creative. All that matters is you get on one of the trains, right? If there's 20 trains going, just get on one. If you miss a few, it's fine. There's more coming, but just get on the platform. Like as long as you're on the platform, you're going to find one of them you're going to get on, right? But you just have to get yourself on the platform. And that's what's so powerful is like you can't take a wrong turn. And if you take a wrong turn, it's not a wrong turn if you actually listen to what would I've done better. So for example, if you call a relationship and you put it down to bad timing, right? Where I would encourage you to go is to really think about, hold on a second, was it bad timing because it didn't work out? Am I upset that it didn't work out? Okay, what upsets me about this not working out? Was it the expectations that it had to lead somewhere? Was it the expectations that it was going to last longer? Was it actually, if I sit with myself and get really honest, do I think that I maybe played a part in the reason why it didn't work out, right? So sometimes we can kind of spiritually escape by calling things like, oh, bad timing, or we were twin flames, and what's the difference between a twin flame and a soulmate, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure that there's, truth to all of those things. But to the extent that it keeps us away from that real sitting with self honesty, getting to understand the why behind why something disappoints us or excites us, and what part we're playing in the absence of it or the failing of it or the manifestation of it. And so this is where bad timing is just one of those things that it's such a nebulous concept, because how can any of us really understand whether something was perfectly timed or not? Because for as long as we're in these human bodies, we are seeing the Earth's only play out from one locus of attention and concentration, which is through our own eyes. So we never see the big picture. We never see, like that parable says, what seemed like a good idea or a good thing in the moment later turns out to be a good thing or a bad thing or whatever. So whenever I feel like I'm disappointed in something, and this is something I do a lot, whenever I feel like crushed by something or disappointed with something, I try to imagine myself giggling about it in the future and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought that was like turned out so badly. Because can I imagine a situation, any type of outcome that could happen from here, and I just make myself imagine one where I would look back and be like, oh, actually that was pretty freaking great. And even just that exercise of forcing myself to imagine what could come next as a twist of fate makes me just be more relaxed around the whole situation, rather than think that today is like the final answer, you know?
And I think sometimes when people hear these kind of conversations where they're like, oh, there's no such thing as bad timing and you're never going to miss your purpose, like that kind of thing, I want people you to go even a notch deeper, because I know there's a notch deeper in there, like scientific, maybe not scientifically, but like explain to me the mechanics of why you believe that.
Because everything that you get given as a trait comes here to be transformed. And so the universe is going to factor in those off roads that you're going to take to correct those. So from that level, there's no such thing as bad timing. But also because scientifically, firstly, time is not real. And when we say not real, of course, it's real in our experience, but it is, and this is already starting to get backed up, is that it's relative. So those moments where an hour feels like forever, and those moments where 4 hours goes by so quickly, again, because of the locus of our attention, right? And because of how packed every single one of those minutes is. So me saying there's no such thing as bad timing / you can't get it wrong, you're going to find your purpose anyway, that is true. However, again, if we take it even more of a macro perspective, you can completely listen and worship at the feet of control, lack, separation. But even then, you'd come back in your next life and still have the same thread to work on. So your thread is always going to be your thread. And the universe will bring you back as many times because it wants you to finish that thread. And you are going to, like Marcus Weston said, if you heard that episode last week, you are 100% guaranteed to complete that karma, complete that purpose. Again, if you're listening to this, you're probably someone who's really from a heart place wanting to complete that now, right? And I think the very fact that you want to means that you will, because probably in previous lifetimes, you didn't have a desire to. And our souls almost need to have all those lifetimes where we mess it up, all those lifetimes where, and when I say mess it up, I don't mean sitting there analyzing if something was good or bad timing. I mean, mess it up, like do harm to others, you know, sit on their couch and avoid life, run from life, you know, do things that were a little more nefarious than I would guess that most people would ever dream of doing who are listening to this, right? So to acknowledge that goodness and pure intention is the most important thing that gets you there. Because why? If we're here to become like the creator, the number one quality that we need to embody is goodness and pure intention. So if you are moving with pure intentions, it's simply the law that the more you're behaving like the light, the more you're close to the light, and therefore the more you're carried and held by the light. So it's not even necessarily, of course, we need to take action, but just by the pure fact that you want to do something from a true place, that's actually what opens up the help from the universe so you actually get there. But in previous lives, you probably didn't have the pure intention to get there. And the universe is always going to honor your free will. So it's going to say, if she's not ready yet, or if he's not ready yet, everything in the right timing. Back to the timing, right? Until you're ready, you're not ready. So if you're someone who's aching to be ready, you are ready. You see?
Yes. And I also think this idea of bad timing is kind of based in our perspective that we know what is supposed to happen in our life. Like we have these dreams and these goals and these things that we want to achieve. And we actually think that that's what our soul wants. But what our soul wants is the transformation that we go through to get there, slash the transformation of getting the actual thing and being in the actual thing. So the soul doesn't really care like, oh, I'm writing a book. It doesn't care about that. It cares about the transformation that it went through to write the book.
Yes. And if you're curious from a human design lens about a little bit of what your soul actually wants, you would look at your incarnation cross, which is the purpose of this incarnation for you. So, for example, you know, somebody could be here to create beauty in this world. And so, like you said, whether they do it through the medium of a book or whether they do it through the medium of designing furniture, it doesn't really matter about the form, it matters about the content, like that the soul is meant to bring down into this world, right? That flavor, that essence that person is here to contribute into the world. If someone is here to build structures, that could apply to so many different things, but the soul wants to leave behind some sprinkle of more structure added to this world, right? And like you said, of course, to transform its consciousness in the meantime, that's the dream, that's the goal. And so we are too focused on form and not enough on content. And that's why I think the incarnation crosses are so beautiful, because it's like the taskmaster a little bit, like it's assigning everybody their perfect task so that we have enough of everyone doing each thing for it to be a whole balanced world where everybody benefits. And you were telling me recently, which is so pertinent to talking about incarnation crosses, that the day that you had like the most fun was a day that you spent having really interesting conversations and with all your friends and your family. And you were like, all I did was talk to my people all day. And we were laughing about it because we were saying, well, you know, everyone has this such narrow idea of what fun is, but the soul has a very specific thing of what lights it up, way more than what our societal conditioning tells us is available. And like that was your idea of a great time, and someone else that could be their nightmare, right? But you know, because it's your incarnation cross.
That's what I'm saying, where the more you play with that in different areas of your life, the more you realize that that is what brings richness to your particular life. Like, for example, what would you say? So if that's like my best day ever, like what would you say with your incarnation cross is like your best day ever?
Being with my people.
Explain why you say that.
Because I'm a cross of the four ways, which is about making sure people are taken care of physically and spiritually. And so there's nothing that fills me up more than feeling like, oh, and I'm a 2-4 as well, right? So 2-4 is my profile. So being with my people, connecting with my people, but not necessarily in the conversation piece doesn't necessarily, of course, I like a conversation, but it's just the being and the caring for people and the almost like having a vessel to show care for in through and in. And then obviously as a 2-4, I love doing it for the people that I'm really close to. Um, But it's also so fascinating because if you go into the app, you'll get a full explanation of that. You think you kind of understand it when you first read about it, but there's so many levels to the incarnation cross that every time I read mine, I see it more and more and more and more deeply. And also, Taylor, I would say that our incarnation crosses are a reason why we love our work so much, because I get to take care of a tribe in my work, and you get to explain things and clarify. So much people don't know this, but so much of what you do behind the scenes is like managing all the sort of launches and the updates and the development of the app and all that project management, basically, and seeing up all of that and organizing all the systems behind the scenes. And you're always messaging me, be like, I'm so happy I get to do this. Is so fun for me. Oh my god, I love making a new system. When you're like, oh, don't tempt me with a good time, I need to make a new file for us and stuff. And so it really is about honoring those things, and you only see them more and more. So you're not going to read your incarnation cross and be like, oh, I need to make a system. You're going to read your incarnation cross. It's going to kind of dip into your soul a little bit. It's going to drip into your awareness. And then you're going to catch yourself doing something, watch yourself enjoy it, and then connect the dots. So again, it's not about how do I avoid bad timing. It's not about how do I become my real self. It's not what does my real self look like? What does my purpose look like? It's I swear to you, your strategy and authority. And it's so hard for the spiritual ego to accept that, because we think it has to be complicated, and we think that we want to know how it ends before we start on the path, but we just need to start on the path, and there is no getting around that. When they say strategy and authority, that is literally how to walk the path, and that's why it's so rudimentary and almost annoyingly practical, because they're like, oh, I just got to know which steps to take, and I just got to take the step that's in front of me, and I don't know what's coming next. Okay, well, that's boring. And then you turn around in a year's time and you're like, oh, that actually turned out to be pretty magical.
And when you were explaining earlier about the threads and how we have this, finite, would you say finite amount of thread? The strategy and authority, to me, I was picturing, well, that's the most efficient way to use our thread. Why would I waste my thread on making this decision and this decision and this decision not based off of my authority, and then having to get my authority to come back around and correct me and put me back on course?
Mm-hmm. Although this is where free will and destiny converge, because imagine if your destiny, your final point is you're already moving towards it. Your free will is just how you meander on the way there. So the physical thread, again, is not about timing, i.e., if you spend too much time doing something, you'll die earlier. It's not really like that, because matter is more important than time. So you are gonna, it's already imagined, pre-written, that this is where you're gonna end, and this is where you're starting, and these are all the places you're gonna move to in the middle, right? And through the illusion of your free will, which is a very necessary illusion, because that's what creates your consciousness to change and up level, it's still kind of known where you're going to go. And that's why there's no such thing as bad timing, because you are always in the right place at the right time, because either you'll be in the right place because it's aligned, or you got there and it was unaligned and you did something about it. And if you didn't do something about it this time, there's 20 more times, and you'll reach the point where you've learned the lesson at some point. So even if for now, there's so many times when I look back and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd done that then, instead of repeat the thing 3 times. But it's like it almost needed for my journey 3 times to happen for me to reach the point where it was like absolutely clear I was not doing that again. So you also need as many times as you need to take the same off-roads, you see? So it's all perfect. And that's why I'm not saying it from a woo-woo spiritual place. Like, it is genuinely perfect if you understand the cosmology behind human design. And also just from knowing what the new discoveries people are making in physics, it's all converging to the same conclusion.
And that's kind of too why you've used, leaving a relationship as an example. Like, there's actually no bad timing of leaving a relationship. There's just, like you've said, don't leave before you're ready,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to be good and done
Yeah.
with that lesson.
Exactly. You don't want to force yourself to do something until you really feel it inside you. Again, that's part of your authority, right? Instead of doing it from a place of mental. So a lot of the times people are like, should I stay? Should I go? Should I stay? Should I go? And I often say, wait until you fully are ready to leave, where the cons so outweigh the pros, because then you won't be in that state, which you could be in for years, of should I have stayed? Should I have stayed? That's going to delay your life even more. Or meet the same person, in a different human costume, right? Have to contend with the same issues. So it's like you have to almost wait till that kind of bitter taste in your mouth comes, when you're like, ugh, I'm done. The alcoholic who changes their life overnight when they quit drinking is when they're finally ready to be sick of their own BS. It's not the times when their friends and family send them to rehab 4 or 5 times, right? It's when you feel that thing inside where it's impossible to not stay where you are, but to move. And that's why, yes, you can delay if you mentally force yourself into a decision, but you really, really, really cannot get it wrong, because you're either going the way of learning or you're going the way of alignment. And ultimately, they actually go towards the same thing anyway.
So we've mentioned a couple different aspects of the chart. And if anyone is confused about some of the words that we've said, I think we've mentioned Incarnation Cross, which you can look in your app. In the app, you can look up your chart, scroll down, you'll see something called Incarnation Cross. We've mentioned your profile, which is your personality. And we mentioned strategy and authority, which is how you make things happen. And every single one of those pieces has a very precise explanation on how to work with that thing in your life. And like Jenna said, you could listen to it one time and be like, okay, cool, I got it. But then the more you live your life and the more you apply it in your life, revisit that information, because you will hear it differently. Absolutely, you will hear it differently.
It still amazes me so much to this day of how beautifully deep such seemingly flippant maybe concepts or instructions become. And the more you understand about human design, the more I'm amazed by, wow, the perfection of it all is just mind-blowing.